Um, I am Tony Green with Safe Kids Worldwide. Happy to be here with you today. Thank you for joining us. Just want to start out with three short ground rules. One, this meeting is being taped so other people can take advantage of it. Please, unless you are called on to ask a question, keep your instrument muted. When we do get to questions, we'll use the functions at the bottom of the page, which is either a thumbs up or a clapping icon. And Shane will recognize you. Shane will keep the order in which you want to ask a question and introduce you. So why are we here today? Around the holidays, starting in November of last year, we began to see an increase in issues, a range of issues relating to child consumer product safety. A lot of it had to do with counterfeit products. And while we heard about some counterfeit seats in Idaho from our former friends at Safe Kids, they're still our friends, they just aren't with Safe Kids Idaho anymore. But the most compelling thing that I saw was CNN did a story about a fake car seat, a Duna. They hired the Michigan Research Facility, which is really excellent, to do a test on the fake car seat. And the car seat just exploded as if there was an IED under it. So we've gotten more and more involved in this. It's presented some advocacy opportunities, and many of you have from Safe Kids have joined us in those activities. And around the same time, the CPSC had a smart idea, and that was to create a consumer ombudsman at the agency. And this is the first time that they've done it. And in addition to having a smart idea, they chose a really smart person to do the job. I know Safe Kids has counted on Jonathan, but literally every parent in America has. So a little bit about Jonathan. He's been at the CPSC for a long time. What's it, approaching 20 years maybe, Jonathan? He looks at emerging hazards. He has a special focus on children: suffocation, strangulation, submersion, choking, toxic exposures, poisoning, falls, off-road vehicle accidents. Jonathan has 3 kids, which I know are out playing right now. We talked about this before we started, but they are a 15-year-old girl and twin 11-year-old boys. Jonathan has not wrapped them in bubble wrap. They can still climb trees, paddle canoes, and even ride horses, but with a helmet. And they're wearing helmets on their bikes as we speak. Many on this call are involved in child passenger safety. And even though I mentioned a car seat earlier on, remember that the CPSC does not have jurisdiction over car seats. So we'd have to get on the phone. We'd have to get on in the room somebody from NHTSA. Pam, you have your hand up? No? So I'm going to ask the first question, and it's a softball. So Jonathan, you're the first ever consumer ombudsman. What's your roadmap for this new position and your vision for what you want to accomplish? And thank you for joining us.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a real pleasure to be able to talk to so many consumer advocates all at the same time. And it's so efficient, I can't stand it. I will also mention that I have spoken about this new role already with another organization, ICFSO. And so if any of you attended that particular presentation, this might sound a little bit familiar. So if you want to excuse yourself because you've heard that before, that's fine, and I'm not going to feel offended if people bail, having heard a description of the new position at the CPSC. Also, let me just lay the groundwork the Consumer Product Safety Commission is not the largest agency in the federal government, but we're in charge of protecting consumers from the unreasonable risk of injury associated with all those consumer products that we deal with every day. And there's more than 15,000 categories of products. We don't deal with food, drugs, cosmetics. We don't deal with guns and tobacco. We don't deal with pesticides and chemicals used in industrial situations. We don't deal with cars. All those are taken care of by other agencies, but pretty much everything else is ours. I have been involved with juvenile products mostly because I came to the agency as a child psychologist. I specialized in cognitive development of children and educational psychology. That was my thing. But they needed someone to help them with toys. And so I was recruited to help with the regulation of toys and figuring out toy-related injuries when I first started back in 2001. So I did a lot of age determinations for toys. I did that until it drove me crazy. Now, you might think that that's a really cool job, you get to play with toys all day, right? But after you get your 60th bag of mislabeled marbles, you really want to lose your marbles because it's not a challenge. For the most part, that job drove me crazy, and I moved up out of there into children's hazards. And I got to work with juvenile products of all stripes, and I loved that. That part of the job was so engaging. And in the Division of Human Factors, as an engineering psychologist, I worked on creating standards for cribs and high chairs and strollers and bassinets and infant carriers and you name it. We covered almost, I think it was 30 different voluntary standards for juvenile products. I did that for years as the head of the Children's Hazards team at the CPSC. And from there, I went on to work with Commissioner Elliott Kay in his office as a special assistant. He called me a senior policy advisor, which means that I helped him understand what was going on behind the scenes. And from there, I was hired into this new position. And that's really where we want to get to the meat of this discussion is, what is this new position at the agency, this Consumer Ombudsman? And how can it help consumer advocates? Because I know we have an audience full of consumer advocates. So I'm going to share my screen and we'll talk just briefly about the vision for this, this new role. And I can say that this role was actually contemplated 40 years ago. I have it on good authority from people who worked at the agency back then, that they'd always wanted to have some kind of an interface between consumers and the agency. They wanted someone who was assigned that job, but it never came to fruition until just the last couple years they started talking about it and finally funded the position this year. So building on the success of the Small Business Ombudsman at the agency, we are following a model of outreach. So we're trying to get people involved in consumer product safety through various means. And I'll talk about some of those in a minute. But the main mission, and this is really a summary of what's a very large document, but I've boiled it down to just these few points, that the Consumer Ombudsman is there for consumers who want to learn about the agency. And the Consumer Ombudsman is there for the agency when they want to learn about consumers, right? In a lyrical moment there, they penned the phrase, to provide the agency perspective to consumers and a consumer perspective to the agency. And in a nice meta level way, that's my main mission. So I'm supposed to speak up for consumers and the consumer voice. I'm also supposed to be sort of a coach or a teacher. So if somebody is dealing with the agency for the first time, there is an awful lot of new language and an awful lot of acronyms that make no sense to people who've never engaged with a federal agency. And I can help provide that understanding behind the scenes for a consumer advocate who wants to make a point to the commission, who wants to present something or make a case. So I'm trying to interpret federal rules in ways that are understandable to the average consumer. I'm there to advise individual consumers if they need some help understanding what's going on. And I'm there to build relationships with consumers and enhance consumer engagement, especially with voluntary standards. For those of you who have been involved in safety standards, the ANSI essential requirements always call out the need for a balance on a committee of people making a standard. So industry comes to the table in droves, but consumers are often hard to find. You may have 1 or 2 consumers in a room of 60 or 70 industry members, and that's not really a balance. So we need to encourage consumers and facilitate consumers making a contribution to voluntary standards. And that's been given to me as a task to increase consumer participation. I do have one slide about what the Consumer Ombudsman does not do, and it's because the word ombudsman comes to us actually from Swedish, and it means someone who has a kind of a legal authority. I'm not that kind of ombudsman. I don't provide legal notice or counsel. I don't have any say in how the agency does its business. And promoting my agenda does not change how the Commission does any of its rulemaking. And I also, like everybody else at the Commission, cannot discuss open cases that are under investigation. That's just a standard across the board violation of law. You just never name names until it's worked its way through the legal process. So as a consumer ombudsman, I'm not the sort that would help you with a legal case, but I am the sort who would help you learn and understand and be educated about what this federal government is doing in the area that you're interested in. In any of those 15,000 categories of products that we cover, I can help you. And if I can't, I know who to ask at the agency, because I've worked up and down hazard identification, compliance, and even in the commissioner's offices. So far, the response from staff and from the public has been wonderful to this new position that I'm inhabiting. It's a real joy, actually, to me to be the first person in this role. And these are some common topics that have come up, and you might see some things in this list that are perhaps inquiries that you'd like to make of the Consumer Ombudsman in the future. But I see a lot of concerns and criticism of the agency's ways of doing things, and that's appropriate. People should have an opportunity, and they should have a point of contact to make a complaint about what we're doing if we do something that's not right. And I also get a lot of discussion of technical matters that maybe are not discernible by the average consumer. So I do a lot of perceptions, attitudes, and beliefs about hazards themselves. And I know that this audience is full of people who are going to do that very same activity all the time. People don't understand a car seat, or they don't understand the dynamics of bicycle helmets, and they might have some ideas of their own that, well, maybe they're not needed, and it's really just some economic ploy to sell products needlessly. A lot of that explaining falls into my my responsibilities, although I don't do car seats like Tony said. I get inquiries from people who want technical assistance, and I get inquiries from people who want to submit comments on public rulemaking. And this is great because we never have enough comments on rulemaking, especially from consumers. We may get a fair amount from industry experts when we are making a rule, but the consumer, because consumers are not paid to give us comments, may not be giving quite as many or quite as fulsome discussion as we would like. And the consumer's voice is valued by the commissioners. And I know from firsthand experience that they like to hear from consumers. They like to know what consumers think of the way that we are making a new rule for a product. And I also hear from consumer advocates about the priorities of the federal agency. And we actually have an opportunity once a year for public comment in a hearing before the commission about the priorities that we're selecting. That, well, I say we're selecting them, really the commissioners are selecting them. So that's slide number 4 already, and I've just been droning on. I will say, if anybody has a question and they want to ask it at this juncture, this would be a great time to ask anything that's come to mind. Are there any questions so far yet? Jennifer?
Okay, I'll ask if you don't have anybody in line.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Jennifer from Sacramento. We are lucky to have a CPSC product investigator in our region, Mary. She's come to some of our meetings and presented. So if one of us spots a product that we think is unsafe, should we send it to her first, or should we contact you first, or how would you like us to do that?
If you spot a product that's a problem, the best thing to do is go straight to www.saferproducts.gov, and you can make a full report there. Reporting them to our field investigators is also effective, but it's adding one step to the process because they're going to make the report too. So if you make a report on saferproducts.gov, you can decide to keep your information private if you want, or you can decide to let it be published if you want. So that's really the easiest way to do it. You'll type in, the intake form actually has just been simplified, so it's not quite as onerous as it used to be. But you still can put in model number, you can upload photographs, scans of receipts. I mean, anything you want to, you can submit on saferproducts.gov. And that's not just going into the ether and stored forever. Every single report at saferproducts.gov is reviewed by a team of experts in that whatever product category it falls in. So if it's a juvenile product, it goes to the children's team. If it's a chemical product, it goes to the chemical team. Other mechanical hazards and engine-driven tools and such are all carried by different engineers. But that expert group codes it and decides how to open an investigation if there's something there that is matching up, making up a pattern of a problem. And those reports may eventually lead to a recall someday. So saferproducts.gov is a great one to have in your bookmarks in your browser. And you can tell all your friends too, if they encounter a problem with a consumer product, that's the place to make the report. Also, at this point, I would encourage everybody to sign up for CPSC recall alerts at the same website. You can sign up for recall alerts and get on our listserv. And every time that a consumer product is recalled, you'll get an email. Any other questions?
No, thank you. I was just going to say that I think the most common person that we hear discussing products is someone that works on a pediatrics floor of one of our local hospitals. She's always seeing kids swallowing stuff or hurting themselves, so she's probably the one that reports things the most. But thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other raised hands in the queue at this time. So Dr. Midgett, do you want to go ahead?
Okay, great. So there's my contact information, and I would like to ask everybody in the audience to make note of this email address and send it to all your friends and all your family and all your constituents and everybody you work with too, because part of my job is to make sure that the consumer knows that I'm here and knows that the agency is here. And you would be shocked to find out how many people still really don't know what the CPSC is when I tell them who I work for. And so I need to get the word out. And I know that this group of people is well connected, and you can disseminate my information as widely as you want. Publish it in your newsletters, send it in greeting cards to your grandma, anybody. And I'm happy to help them improve the product safety of this country any way that I can. There's the link to saferproducts.gov at the bottom of that slide, and my phone number as well. So I think that I will just make one more appeal, and that is for voluntary standards participation. Like I said, we're always trying to find people who can contribute to voluntary standards, and consumers don't realize that they really are wanted and needed in those activities. A voluntary standard is built by a group of industry competitors. The competitors are coming together to work together to make a safety standard and to share the expertise that they've learned from making and selling certain product types, for instance, cribs or strollers or high chairs, bike helmets, etc. These standards are built by the expertise of the manufacturing industry, but they need to know the user's perspective, right? The people who are using that crib on a daily basis are so valuable in that discussion that I just can't emphasize enough how important it is to have a consumer voice in the room. And any one of you could sign up and contribute to one of these voluntary standards. Membership is not expensive, and once you are a member, you will be hooked into the committee of your choice, and you can contribute as much or as little as you want. There are some consumers who only just monitor email exchanges, and then they vote on the ballot at the end, which is about the lowest level of participation that you could engage in, and that's fine. If you don't have the wherewithal to go to meetings or you don't have the time to attend conference calls, you don't have to. You can still be a member and contribute your vote at the end, and that's an important part of consumer advocacy. But if you do have the time and the inclination, you can learn how the standard mechanisms work, the procedures that go into making a standard. And you could participate in task group meetings, and you could participate in making proposals, and then speaking in a wider forum to try to persuade people that your idea is good. And you could actually get requirements put into a standard based on your own experience. And I think consumers don't realize that they are needed and that they could make that kind of contribution to society. So please, if anybody has an interest in participating in voluntary standards, you can reach out to me and I will help you walk right through the process. And at any time in the process, if something's confusing, I'll help you figure it out. I have almost 20 years of experience in standards, and I know how they work, and I can explain the jargon and tell you the procedures to meet your objectives, whatever objectives you have for advocacy and for safety. So that's my final appeal, and I hope somebody in the audience takes me up on it and decides to participate in voluntary standards. So
Jonathan,
are there any other questions that came
can
up?
I ask you, Jonathan,
Sure.
how is the best way for us to find out about standards that are out there that we should be commenting on?
Well, the best way to find out about the standards would probably be to pay attention to what rules are being made by my agency. The CPSC will be doing work, and we have a website that lists the voluntary standards, and I can provide you a direct link to it, but you can probably find it on our front page. If you go to the menu, there's a little hamburger menu in the top right corner. You can pull that down, and there will be a link there to understand standards better. And it's actually quite a huge and daunting list of standards that you could potentially participate in. But once you select one or two standards that you're interested in, then that's really not as daunting, because at that point, once you sign up, it's just a matter of reading the ballots as they come out and staying abreast of the task group activities. For someone who's a scientist or a researcher, it's fascinating, because every year or so, a subcommittee associated with juvenile products, for instance, would get a data dump from my agency. The epidemiologist put together a spreadsheet of all the incidents associated with that product category for the last year or since the last update that subcommittee got. And they email that out to everybody in the committee, and everybody can read the narratives of what happened in those incidents. And there is no better way to get a hold of the issues that are facing an industry, say for instance, strollers. You read all the stroller incidents that have occurred in the last year, and you understand how people are getting hurt with that product. And then the discussion evolves from the incidents into a discussion of solutions. Maybe if we had a different test, maybe if we modified the current test, we could prevent these types of injuries. And as a scientist, it's fascinating. As a researcher, someone who's interested in health and safety and social science and psychology, it's an inexhaustible supply of dissertation material if you're so interested. But it's the best way really is to choose a product category that you like and go to the ASTM website, and there you can put in a keyword and find what the standard is. The other way to do it is to go to our website at cpsc.gov and look on the voluntary standards website. The third way to do it is just to reach out directly to me and say, I want to be associated with, children's art supplies, and I will do it for you and send you an email that tells you which subcommittees might be interesting. That is maybe the easiest way to do it if you want to do it that way too. I'm happy to help. Any other questions about that?
Hey, Libby, do you want to ask your question that you put into chat? Libby?
Stop the share.
Hey, Libby, could you unmute yourself and ask the question you asked about the pandemic?
Actually, I can read it. I see the chat here.
Okay.
I'm curious if any new areas emerged with product safety during the pandemic that hadn't been on the radar before. Well, there's something that I hesitate to mention. It is true that we continue to learn new things every day with the pandemic, and curious to see, yeah. Here's the thing. Online shopping has become an integral part of this pandemic. And the issue that I've seen emerge is a greater interest from the commissioners in how we regulate things online. And I can tell you that the way we regulate things online is more difficult than the brick and mortar stores because a lot of these third-party platforms involve manufacturers who are overseas. So it's a different way of enforcing. And one of the commissioners recently called for an increase in the number of staff members that we have who are dealing with those online shopping strategies. So I think more will come from that discussion. I can't report that I know how the commission will evolve, but I think that they are going to have to evolve in a way to account for the online third-party sellers that are dominating the world. So yeah, that has been made more salient to me during the pandemic. Yeah, that's a good question. I thank you for asking. Any tips for the upcoming holiday shopping season? Yes, holiday deals are being promoted already. What should we tell families to look out for this year? Queuing off of the online shopping experience, if you see something that is an abnormally good deal on something that is being promoted on a third-party seller's website, basically follow the adage that if it seems too good to be true, it probably is too good to be true, and just walk away. That would be my advice for this shopping season, that trusted sellers are going to be somebody we value even more and more in the world of an online retailing.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay.
That's a lot of advocacy that we're doing. It has to do with the online shopping and all of the issues that arise from it. But I got a question from email, and that is, and we've all been talking about it at Save Kids. Do you have recommendations on how we can celebrate Halloween this year?
CPSC did send out a recent press release, and the press release was, let me think. Now it had something. It was something like celebrate Halloween safely in a COVID environment. Let me just pull this up and see if I think I can find it here pretty quickly in the newsroom. Yeah. So Office of Communications has said, follow the Centers for the CDC's advice for Halloween this year. Among the key guidance, a Halloween mask is not an appropriate substitute for a protective cloth mask. CPSC joins the CDC in recommending that consumers wear protective cloth masks of at least 2 layers of breathable fabric, not a costume mask. And protective masks should never be worn under a costume mask because it's become hard to breathe. And if children and adults wear costumes this Halloween, be aware that costume fabrics and loose billowy clothes, such as capes or gowns, can easily catch fire. Never drag a costume over an open flame. And of course, that's well-known advice. We give that every year. Stay away from candles and fire pits. And they say avoid overly long and baggy costumes. And because lots of last year's Halloween-related injuries involved trips and falls. And they're also highlighting pumpkin carving injuries. Apparently, pumpkin carving involves sharp implements and should be done carefully, supervised. So those are the CPSC's latest advice for Halloween this year, but mostly I think they're following CDC. How can we assure we get the latest news releases from CPSC with regards to children's safety? Well, if you go to the CPSC website and you want to sign up for our listserv, you can actually select the topic area that you're interested in. So if you go to cpsc.gov and you click on the hamburger menu at the top right of the home screen, and then click on the recalls word, it gives you a recalls list and it says choose your recall emails, and then you go to a subscription page where you put in your email address, and you can select just the one that says recalls involving infant-child products sent at the end of the day. So that will target just your children's safety needs. And you can also select sports and recreation or outdoors or household products, depending whatever you want to hear about. So I apologize that it's so hard to find, but let me just talk you through it again. It's the homepage, cpsc.gov, the top hamburger menu drop down, and then which you will just see a list of words, but over on the far left of that drop down, it says recalls. You hit recalls, and then you get a recall list, which actually has the latest recalls down below, but there's a link that says choose your recall emails, and that's how you sign up. Also over on the side, you see report on safe products. That will take you to saferproducts.gov. So our website is useful. You just got to figure it out. We are up for actually renovating this website this year. We'll see if we can make it more consumer friendly. But for now, this is what we have to deal with. So let's see, anything else in this chat here?
This is Karma, and I have a question for you. My name is Karma Hansen. I'm the coordinator of Safe Kids Grand Forks in Grand Forks, North Dakota. Can you tell me what the percentage is of products that actually have the registration card filled out and turned back in? At one time I had heard it was as low as 10%. Just wondering if you have any sense of what that is.
Yeah, so the registration cards are hard for us to know exactly how many each manufacturer gets, and some manufacturers may have higher rates than others. But that 10% number does sound about right. I think it would definitely be below 20%. Registration cards, I think, and this is just my opinion, and I'm not speaking for the agency or the commissioners, but my opinion is that they are more likely to be turned in if the manufacturer puts in big, bold letters, we will never use this information to send you stuff, because registration cards are an personal information grab, which they're not. They can't be used that way, yet it's just not, that message is not getting out there. So consumers are not as likely to fill them out as they would be if they knew for a fact that it was not a privacy invasion.
I think the other issue with that as it relates to privacy is a lot of times it's a postcard and you fill it out, and when you send it through the mail, your information is exposed. It's not covered in any way with it being on a postcard.
I think you're absolutely right. And those privacy concerns are so important in the 21st century, and registration cards are really a 20th century technology. There's room for improvement, and it's not like the commission hasn't thought about it. But it's hard to make it a requirement because of the cost benefit analysis. But if I were a manufacturer, those product registrations would be an easy point and shoot with a cell phone. It would just be a QR code, bang, done. But the wheels of change move slowly.
Well, or the other thing would be to take a picture of the product label and text it to a number, and then you wouldn't necessarily have the name of the person, but you'd have their cell phone contact.
Yeah, that would be.
If there was a product, you could text them back that there had been a recall on a product that they had sent an image in of. Yeah,
that would be a wonderful thing. In the 21st century, the information is going to find us, and having to sign up for listservs and federal government website announcements will not be as effective as the manufacturers themselves reaching back to consumers. And actually, in the last 10 years, we actually have seen an improvement. There have been some recalls in the last decade where they were able to reach everybody who bought some product, which wouldn't have happened back in the 70s and 80s. So it's getting better, but I think the implications for businesses and for consumers still have to be worked through. So, like I say, the wheels of change move slowly.
Jonathan, one other question we have from the emails. In child passenger safety, there are things that we've learned during the COVID-19 pandemic that are going to be lessons learned persisting beyond COVID. Are there similar lessons learned for consumer protection?
Yeah, we've seen an increase in drowning, and I think that with the pandemic happening, there's a real difference, I think, in people's perceptions of what parental supervision is. I think that's going to evolve in a way that we haven't thought of before, and because kids have been home, and that spike in drownings is alarming, but it's perfectly predictable. You can see that people couldn't get out, couldn't get to school, and so people are at home in different patterns of interaction and different patterns of supervising kids that they haven't had to engage in before because they were in school. So I think that's something that's going to change and evolve. So actually, if you're a researcher, parental supervision, especially surrounding safety behaviors, is really not well researched. There were some beginnings. Dr. Barbara Morangello in the University of Guelph in Southern Ontario did a lot on parental supervision, but there's a lot more that could be done. And I think I would like to see some academics pick up that, especially in the post-COVID world, because supervision and advice for parents of how to supervise, especially if they have something dangerous in their home, like a swimming pool or a spa, really needs to get better. It needs to be more, has to have more vocabulary surrounding the different types of supervision, and it has to have better advice for people. But anyway, that's one of my wish lists for the academic community to pick up. We have a question from Jay Howell. Hey, Jay. In what ways might advocacy groups help to improve recall effectiveness? Well, advocacy groups can get the word out about our recall listserv so people hear about the recalls. Advocacy groups can also highlight the existence of our agency and what we do and how important we are to their well-being. And so just getting that word out to consumers is something that consumer advocacy groups and their networks can promote all the time. And it is something that you need to promote all the time. You can't just do it once, because there are new parents built every day, or like, people become parents every day. And that new crop of people need to be brought into the product safety fold. So it's an ongoing discussion with the American populace that there's somebody there who's trying to protect you from dangerous products, and we can't help you if you don't know who we are. So I think that sort of awareness building is something that consumers and consumer advocates can do all the time. The other thing that they might do to improve recall effectiveness is to popularize with the people they buy from their needs in that regard, and make it an issue. I've talked to many industry members over the years who said to me, you know, safety doesn't sell. We spend all this time working on this, but if we put it on the label that it's an important safety feature, that doesn't change sales at all. But consumer groups can make it an issue, and consumer groups can help raise the importance of safety in the buying behavior of their groups. And I think that that kind of pressure makes it easier for companies to do the right thing and to be involved in safety from the design stage all the way to when you throw the product out. These things are important to consumers, and so they get attention. I mean, just as an example, think about this idea of sustainability, which isn't related to safety per se. But 20 years ago, sustainability didn't help you sell your products. We didn't even talk about sustainability. And yet now, people are out there buying products specifically because they come from a sustainable product supply chain, right? It's important to the consumers. Well, if consumers make safety important for them, that makes it easier for the manufacturers to justify the effort it takes to make things safer than they're making them now. And it just makes sense that advocates will be able to speak that to the manufacturers. Thanks for that question, Jay.
It's a really good question, and it seems to me that if a company wants to be a good corporate citizen, and that probably is less important these days than it was a couple of years ago, but if they want to be a good corporate citizen, then they must make the news about a recalled product, a defective product, much more widespread through all of their channels. I think you're right, Jonathan, that consumer advocates can turn up the volume on that.
Yeah, and as a follow-on to that idea, we could ask the question: how can retailers help improve recall effectiveness? Because I know that Mr. Howell works for a major retailer, and I will say this: there is a lot that a retailer can do to increase awareness of safety, and they can really put it under what I would call customer care, right? The retailer engages already in customer care, but the retailer has an opportunity to be an educator and a guide for a lot of these safety issues. And I think that there is something to be said for the public relations benefits to a retailer of having a very in-depth customer care program where people who have and been associated with a product that's gotten recalled, the retailer helps them go through that recall process as easily as possible. And retailers really have a great way to step up with that with their customer loyalty programs and their customer contacts that they have all the time. If a retailer wanted to step in there and popularize safety, that retailer really could make a big difference in the world. And I'm telling you, that is worth doing. Yeah, like promoting CPSC and NHTSA consumer product safety awareness campaigns, exactly, and recalls, and saferproducts.gov, and all the other consumer care activities that a retailer can engage in. So yeah, that's definitely a place that your retailer could lead, Mr. Howell. You could lead in that regard.
FDA too.
So if I may share, there there are many retail industry associations out there, and there are actually some retailers who are and have for many years participated in these agency campaigns. And there's an effort underway to broaden the number of retailers that are engaged in promoting that safety awareness. And it's not in an attempt to grow sales, but in an attempt to walk the talk, if you will. You know, if you truly care for your customer and you want to make their lives better, this is just one area that there's an opportunity.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think it's great that retailers are helping us with that, because they have the broadest reach of anybody at the table, really.
That's really all we bring to the table. Right? We rely on the experts at the CPSC and NHTSA and others to provide the message, the content. What we bring to the party is we know how to market, and we have access to a relatively large audience.
Yeah, yeah. Hey,
Jay. Good to see you, Dr. Midgett. You're looking well.
Thanks. You might be able to answer that question earlier about pandemic-related safety issues. Have you seen anything?
We have. For those that don't know me, I at one time also worked for the Consumer Product Safety Commission. So Dr. Midgett and I have worked together in the past. And I'm somewhat of a data hound. Yeah, I watch incident data pretty closely, that comes in through my organization, but also I'm looking at CPSC EPI reports. I look at saferproducts.gov. You can oftentimes learn much from the failure of others before you get bitten. So we watch closely, but yeah, I think we've got situations where, you know, to the point that Dr. Midgett made earlier, with more families being at home, a new environment is somewhat unusual, and I think perhaps the closeness that has been involved, that some children have been not supervised perhaps as well, and in their eagerness or boredom to find something new to do, or engaging in behaviors that we haven't seen them engage in the past, at least to the degree that we've seen. But as far as any particular product, I don't know that I can say that I've seen any statistically significant increase in a particular product, although there has been a pretty good level of activity out of the CPSC on child-proof caps, to make sure that, you know, kind of as children are spending more time in the home around cleaning supplies and essential oils and things like that. Certainly it behooves CPSC to keep an eye on the marketplace to make sure the products are safe when they get in the hands of small children that may not know better.
Yeah, definitely poisoning is an issue that the pandemic has highlighted, as well as drowning, both of those things.
So we told you this was going to end at 2:45. Jonathan, any last words before we sign off?
No, just make sure that everybody knows about saferproducts.gov, make your reports, and sign up for your recall alerts at cpsc.gov. Well,
then let me thank you so much for joining us. This has been really interesting. I think there are a lot of great points have been made, and things that we can work on. We will be sending out a questionnaire for you all to sign, to fill out and tell us how we did, and also tell us what other kinds of programs like this you'd like to see, and other agencies you'd like to hear from. So thank you all. Have a very great day, and have a great rest of the week. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you.